Hey, if you're tuning into this second part, we really appreciate it. We know that that first one we kind of covered several things that were really important. In the second part, we'll be talking about how old is the Earth, and talking about like evolution and also some things surrounding fine tuning. And so, if you're listening to part two, enjoy and thanks for making it all the way through. And then let's kind of, so that's, we've talked a little bit about, and there's obviously so much more you could talk about with how the universe began.
Again, don't be afraid to reach out. I've really enjoyed talking about this stuff. And
yes, and we'll do more episodes on this later on where we could kind of hone in on specific things. But to kind of move on a little bit to talk about something different, and this is where people outside of Christianity will say that the Bible doesn't make sense, or that science contradicts Christianity, is when talking about how old is the Earth. You can have the hardcore creationist who believes that according to the Bible, and this is the only way that you can view it, is that the Earth is like 6,000 to 8,000 years old, and that's like hardcore creationist.
Earth was built in 7 days.
That Adam and Eve, I guess, were only in the garden for a couple days.
And so
and that the Earth is only 6,000 to 8,000 years old. The problem with that is that there is not really anything to support that. Most
other than strictly looking at the text.
Yes, and most scientists even from the very beginning would agree that the Earth is billions of years old.
Right now, it's the current estimate I think is 13.9 to 14 billion years.
I've read different. I've read 4.6. I've read 13. I've even read I think I even saw some crazy number like 100. But at the least billions of years old. And some Christians would hear that, and that alone, they immediately shut science out. And they go, well, but the Bible doesn't say that, and so that's just wrong. And the question is, do we literally interpret Genesis 1 as 7 days, a day to God is like it is a day to us? And do we assume that within that once God created, finished creation, that Adam and Eve were only in the garden for a couple of days or weeks? But Christians will hear this, oh, the Earth is billions of years old. Well, that doesn't line up with the Bible. And they shut science out because of that. And then scientists will say, well, that's silly. And so, what do we do with that? What would your response be to that question? How old is the Earth? And then looking at Genesis 1 compared to, interpreting that literally, or what I believe is that Genesis 1 is written poetically.
That's what I believe.
It's a beautiful description, a beautiful summary of creation. And I do not believe that that it was 7 literal days, like Sunday through Saturday. And so, but how old is the Earth? I mean, what's your kind of response to that?
So I definitely believe in the billions of years old Earth. And my thought process for that comes from the expansion rate of the universe, which, doing some math, it cancels out and it comes out to around 13 to 14 billion years old. That rewinding is about 13 years long. And so that's what I believe, because that's what we've observed in the real world. And again, I believe that Genesis 1 is very poetic. It was a verbal story that was simplified to tell to children, that was passed down through multiple generations.
Many generations.
And that Moses eventually wrote down to be recorded. So I don't think it was ever really intended to be a literal translation of the actual creation of the universe.
And I guess to clarify, I think Hut and I both would say that we are creationists.
100%.
But we are not like
young
6,000 to
Earth
8,000 young Earth creationists. I fully believe that God created everything. But the timeline.
The timeline is the thing that's up in question. I definitely believe that God laid everything out, and He made the sun, moon, stars. He made the birds and the fish and the animals and men.
And then, of course, made us in His image.
I 100% believe that. It's just the fact that He did it in 7 days, and the universe has only been around for 8,000 years.
Basically, Genesis is real, but it's not literal in the sense of the timing of it.
Exactly.
But some people that I respect would disagree with that. I don't think that is very logical.
Yeah.
I just, even if you take the universe out of it and you just research the Earth,
the Earth looks billions and billions of years old. Not nearly as many as the universe, but
and there's a lot that you could go into that. You can ask, maybe God did create all of it very quickly.
He definitely could have.
Yeah. I believe fully that maybe God did create it in 7 days. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so, just because I think that's saying that God that he views days like we do. And I just, at the time, I don't know that 7 days, like a 24-hour day is a human invention.
Yeah.
It makes sense because, with the sun and light and darkness, like those kinds of things, that's why it happened. It makes a lot of sense. But to say that that's what God was going based on was earthly days. It's like, well, what about before he actually created the earth?
Yeah, and what about before he created the sun, moon, and stars, which he did on day 4, I believe, if my memory serves. And so,
but then let's say he did it in 7 days. Let's just say that's true.
Yeah.
How long were Adam and Eve in the garden?
Yeah, that's another question.
Or honestly, and if it's not literal days, you could ask how long were there just animals before he created man and woman?
Yeah.
Because that man and woman came after the animals, according to what Genesis writes. So there could have been billions of years in between that.
Definitely.
Adam and Eve could have walked in the garden for millions or billions of years.
Yeah, because before they sinned, they had no reason to die. So they were in there and just being in God's presence without the need of death, without the need of sickness.
We believe death is the result of the fall.
Exactly, yeah. Sure. So if you have no sin, you have no reason to die. The wages of sin is death.
Yeah.
No sin, no death. So like you said, if Earth even was created in 7 days, Adam and Eve could have been in there for the billions of years needed.
To me, it seems a little like almost to this idea that maybe Adam and Eve were only in the garden for a few days or weeks is extremely underwhelming and disappointing if that was the case. I don't believe that God's creation when it gets him that quickly. That just that to me, like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And the pushback that I can think of from this is it says that, well, Adam was 120 years old, like it says that. And it's like, well, yes, but that timer started when he left the garden.
Yeah.
It didn't include the time that he spent in the garden. And also the 6,000 to 8,000 year old Earth range also starts from when Adam left the garden. So like, again, the question still stands. Yeah, it's been, I think it's been 6,000 to 8,000 years since Adam left the garden, but I think that the universe and the Earth have been around for much, much longer.
Yeah, and some would say, like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can get into with that, like, where is there evidence for human life earlier than Adam and Eve? Some would say yes. And that's a whole other topic to dive into, which we won't today, but we could spend some time on that at a later date.
Yeah.
But basically, the big question, though, that we're just trying to kind of, I don't want to say brush over, but kind of brush over today.
Yeah.
How old is the Earth? And I think that a Christian can be a creationist and say that the Earth is billions of years old.
Yeah. There's definitely room in there for that.
Yeah. And that's where I stand.
That's where I stand.
That's where HUD stands. And I think that, again, another example that science and Christianity are not at war.
Yeah.
They don't have to be, even when it comes to creation. Now, we're going to talk about some other options for creation, like evolution, which I don't believe in Darwinism, for example, which we're about to get into. But the age of the Earth, if you, from a scientific standpoint, compared to the Bible, you can find a way to fit the scientific view of the age of the Earth into the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't want to say we do not fit the Bible into science. We fit science into the Bible as far as, like we said earlier, science is investigating the Earth that God gave us.
Yeah.
And so, anything else on the age of the Earth that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think that basically covers it.
Yeah. So then let's, a big one, a big topic that we hear a lot about in the scientific community. You hear a lot of agnostic and atheist people talk about it, evolution. Evolution versus creationism.
Yeah.
What do we do with Darwinism? What do we do with that? And I know that you have some thoughts on this. So I'll kind of
definitely.
let you.
So whenever I'm asked if I believe in evolution, my immediate response is, what do you mean by evolution? And I ask this because in my mind, there's two types of evolution. There's macroevolution, which is Darwinism, which is what most people mean when they ask if I believe in an evolution. But there's also another evolution called microevolution, also known as just adaptations. And I would say that Darwinism, macroevolution, does not fit with the Bible. It does not fit with even with current scientific evidence. Microevolution, however, adaptation, I think that fits within the Bible, and I think that can reasonably be argued, and also within scientific evidence of the day, I think it fits. So Darwinism is the belief that life happened by chance, which is a bit of a hole in Darwinianism, which is we'll get into in a little bit. But life kind of started, and then once it started, through processes of natural selection and random genetic mutation of what adaptations survive from generation to generation, starting with like a single bacteria cell, have now spread into every form of life that we see, which includes humans, animals, insects, birds, trees, grass, plants. Every form of life that we see is a direct result of evolution, and it all started with a single celled organism, however many years ago.
And I think within Darwinism, evolution, that's where people, I think the belief comes from, like that we came from chimps, we came from monkeys.
Yeah,
basically.
definitely. That's where that idea comes from.
I believe in that, obviously. Yeah. That's where that's a major one where I'm off the boat there, because I believe that God created man in his image.
Yeah. And we have dominion over animals, so there's a differentiation between us and the rest of the animal kingdom.
Yeah. And so I would make the statement, like, a Christian cannot believe in Darwinism.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That is that would contradict the Bible.
Yes.
Because it says, and we believe that God created us in his image to rule over animals. So this idea that God created a monkey and then we just over hundreds of years derive from that, that's not, that is not biblical.
It doesn't really work. Yeah.
And in some cases, even the scientific community would say that's not accurate. But yeah, so that is where I think when it comes to Darwinism, you would agree, like, a Christian cannot believe in that. But when it comes to evolution, I know that that is what you call macroevolution.
Yeah.
And then you have microevolution. And so the question kind of that we're tackling is evolution completely out of the question when it comes to biblical creationism.
Yeah.
And we would say that Darwinism, yes, out of the question.
Completely out of the question, not possible.
Now, microevolution, and you have written here, or adaptation, what can you explain that?
So adaptation is what we have seen that a lot of people claim as evidence for Darwinism. And it is, an example of it would be your skin tone relative to where you live on the planet. People more closer to the equator tend to have darker skin tones, and people towards the poles will have lighter skin tones. So that's an adaptation, which that you didn't become an entirely new species. But like other examples of it would be how all different types of dogs there are. Everyone believes that dogs originally came from the wolf, and then someone somewhere domesticated a wolf, and through selective breeding, bred all the dog types. And
which makes sense, because there are breeds of dogs that literally look like wolves.
Yeah, like huskies look exactly like wolves, but then also chihuahuas, definitely different, but they're related.
Like my dog, I have a pit mixed with some sort of a bird dog. She doesn't look like a wolf at all.
Yeah.
But she walks on four legs, has a strong jaw, has, canine teeth. And so the idea that she is an adaptation of what would have been a wolf makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm on the boat still with that. I'm okay with that.
Sorry, I'm looking something.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But yeah, so this idea also comes back up in the flood with in Genesis 6:19 through 20.
You mentioned this earlier. I think this is good.
Yeah. So and every kind of living thing of all flesh you shall bring two of every male, or two of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. of the birds according to their kinds, of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing on the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come in to you to keep them alive. And so the reason why I bring that up is because so often Christians read that as kind is equaling to species. So 2 of every, 2 Chihuahuas, 2 German Shepherds, just to continue using the dog example, 2 zebras, 2 giraffes, 2 horses, whatever it could be. But what scholars are more recently starting to discover is that kind most likely relates to the family classification rather than the species classification. So family classification being canines, felines, horses.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And
because otherwise you have to kind of insinuate that that Noah brought millions,
maybe even
species.
billions of species. Yeah.
And it would make sense that if he brought just kinds or one species from a family group, that then after the Great Flood, that those species
as they reproduced
and then adapted, and that's
and
kind
spread throughout the world and adapted to their locations and everything. Yeah.
But this idea that let's say at the time there were let's say that there were only thousands of species to fit all of that on the boat that we see that we have the specifications for seems unlikely.
Yeah.
But kind family group.
Yeah.
Meaning kind. Like that makes
more sense. Makes more sense. Yeah. And so so it just kind of explains how the adaptation works. And then the flood happened shortly after Adam left the garden. I think it was only like 7, 8, 9 generations or so, something like that. Yeah. So pretty soon after Adam left the flood. So there's definitely enough time for any animal to change and adapt.
Thousands of years.
Yeah. But they didn't change and adapt into an entirely different organism. So like a reptile didn't turn into a bird. A dog didn't turn into a cat. A monkey didn't turn into a man. That there's zero evidence of anything like that. Yeah. But there is evidence of frogs becoming more adapted to their biome, whatever they live in, their region that they live in, which is very obvious and seen, which is what Charles Darwin, I think, observed whenever he came up with his theory, is that it was actually adaptation. He just took it a step too far and said that all life came from a single ancestor.
Right. And so, so adaptation, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That kind of evolution. Even humans, I believe that God created humans. But our human bodies have changed over thousands and thousands of years.
I know that we as European descendant North Americans look very different than the Middle Eastern people that would have likely 100%. Been Adam and Eve and Noah and Jesus. We look very different. So that's adaptations.
Yes. So and even just our feet. I think our feet have changed. The way that our feet look nowadays are honestly that's not how they should look, as far as they've adapted that because we wear shoes. But prior to wearing shoes and containing our feet, which I don't know enough about that to know when that started, but our toes are actually supposed to be more spread out.
Yeah.
They get clumped together, and that's where you kind of have your foot's curved and all the toes are kind of curled.
Yeah.
But our feet likely could have could have been much bigger, wider. Toes could have been spread out.
Yeah.
Pads on the feet could have been thicker. And actually, I follow a guy on social media. He's not to get in, he's a CrossFitter, anyways, a Christian guy, but he kind of experimented in it for months. He did everything barefoot, and his feet quickly changed.
Yeah.
Within within a year, his feet got wider.
Yeah.
The pads on his feet got bigger. His toes all spread out. So now, his toes look more like a hand.
Yeah.
All his toes have pretty big gaps.
Yeah.
And so his body adapted actually rather quickly. And so just that example, when you take that example, think about how much animals and humans could change over thousands of years.
Yeah.
He did that to his feet, just going barefoot for months. Imagine thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah. Big
how
changes.
much stuff could adapt and change. And so just for me, that illustration makes sense in my mind. It's something that's a guy that I follow that I watched it happen. It was really interesting to me. He was able to basically completely change his feet.
Yeah.
And so if the body can adapt that quickly, imagine what it can do in thousands of years.
Yeah.
Or same thing for animals.
So yeah. Kind of jumping back into Darwinism, we explained how it doesn't really fit with the Bible, but I mentioned how it doesn't really fit with science either.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of like to just go over that real quick. So the idea that contradicts with Darwinism is this idea of irreducible complexity. And what that means is that an organism or a organ or a device that's made up of multiple different parts, if you were to remove any one of those parts, the entire object would cease to function. And so, like, a very common example of this is a mousetrap. You know, it has a baseboard, it has a swing arm, like latch, a spring. You know, it has multiple different things, but you take any one of those out, it stops working. You take the spring off, it won't snap shut. You take the baseboard off, it can't hold itself together. You take the arm out, there's nothing to collapse and kill the mouse. And so that would be like a common everyday example of irreducibly complex object. And the reason why this is important is because we have discovered biological machines and organs that are irreducibly complex. Some common examples are the eye, the flagellar motor, which is the little tail that bacteria have, and there's an actual motor that drives that tail. And the flagellar motor is probably the most common one when used to disproving evolution, and it is used in the sense of it is made up of 40 different components, which is a lot for a tiny little bacteria cell. Yeah. And if you take any one out, the entire system ceases to work. So like you take just the tail out, it can't drive itself. You take the rotational shaft, just like an engine, it has a rotational shaft. If you take that out, it can't rotate. If you take out the brackets that hold it into the cell wall, it'll obviously fall out and cease to function. So it needs all 40 components to work perfectly. Yeah. And how can you get 40 individual components through random genetic mutations? And Darwin originally states that it is very slight genetic mutations. So 40 individual components to be organized in a very perfect and particular way out of pure random genetic mutation, extremely unlikely. Statistically impossible.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And in response to this, Charles Darwin actually said something about this. He said, quote, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." And that was in his book, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That's his original theory of evolution.
Work on titles.
Yeah. But I mean, it was late 1800s.
I've noticed that though, book titles have gotten much shorter.
Well, our attention span has gotten much shorter. So definitely. So he even said, in short, if you find something that's irreducibly complex, evolution's not true. I'll say it first so that way y'all don't have to worry about it later. We've found things that are irreducibly complex in biological life, and people still believe in it for whatever reason because they're afraid of looking at the other side of the argument.
People don't like change.
Exactly.
Change, and then also, like you said, having to not just change it, but change your mind and change what you believe in. That's always
to change your core beliefs is a big and scary thing.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Don't. But for people out there who maybe you're an atheist, maybe you're someone who really holds to science.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of looking into the idea that there could be more.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that for anyone listening, if you are someone who's listening and maybe you're an atheist or you're wrestling with that, we love you. And,
definitely.
We're doing this. We're talking about these things because we love you.
Yeah. We want you to see the other side of the argument. We want you to know there's more out there.
Yeah. And so, because man, what if I told you that there is actually deep purpose for your life, which I believe that there is,
life-changing, radical.
And so, kind of moving away from that, from evolutionism, evolution, not evolutionism, evolution, Darwinism. We kind of landed more on the microevolution adaptation side of things, which makes sense, that humans have adapted.
Yeah.
And that also animals have adapted, and that even the earth has changed.
Yeah.
And so kind of going from there, I want to, Christopher Hitchens, we mentioned him earlier.
Yeah.
And he was an atheist who was pretty renowned. I believe he died like December of 2011, something like that.
Decently recently.
But he said something in a video one time. He was in the back seat of what looked like a limo, and he was talking with some people in the car.
Yeah.
And
wasn't the guy in the car like actually the Christian that he was debating
yes,
with? Yeah.
Like William something.
Yeah.
But he made a statement, and I'm going to play the video, and so that we can listen to it, and then we're going to talk about this statement that he made. And so I'm gonna play that for us.
At some point, certainly, we were all asked, well, which is the best argument you've yet come up against from the other side? And I think every one of us picks the fine-tuning one. There's the most intriguing, the Goldilocks. Yeah. Fine-tuning the 1 degree, one hair different, nothing. But even though it doesn't prove a design error, could all have happened without it. You have to spend time thinking about it, working on it. It's not trivial. We all say that. And then at one point, I think this is not on camera. I said, if I could convert everyone in this world, not convert, if I could convince to be non-believers, then I've really done brilliantly. And there's only one left. One more, and then it'll be done. There'll be no more religion in the world. No more deism. I wouldn't do it. Jordan said, what do you mean you wouldn't do it? I said, I don't know why I wouldn't do it. And it's not just because there would be nothing left to argue with and no one left to argue with. It's not just that. But there would be that. Somehow, if I could drive it out of the world, I wouldn't. And the incredulity with which he looked at me stays with me still.
So, pretty multiple fascinating statements.
Yes, very fascinating statements.
In that video, and you can I know if you're listening, you'll be able to hear it. It'll be on here, but if you want to actually go and watch it, it's just kind of cool to actually watch him talk about it. You can search on YouTube, Christopher Hitchens makes a shocking confession. It'll come up. But multiple statements that we can talk about from that. First, and we'll talk a little bit about some fine-tuning stuff, but he mentioned that the one thing for him that kind of basically that stumps him as an atheist is the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah.
The idea that how incredibly fine-tuned this earth is for life.
Not just the earth, the entire
really
universe.
The whole universe.
All of existence is, like he said, within a hair of a degree, like minuscule amounts.
Yes. And that one, he said it stumps him. Like
Yeah.
he said for him that he can explain everything else, which I think that we've tackled several things that he wouldn't be able to explain scientifically. But the fine-tuning one, he said it stumps him.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really shocking confession. And we're going to talk about what fine-tuning is and a few things within that. But then he also, the statement that he made, he said that he was having a conversation with Richard Dawkins. And he told Dawkins, he said, and these are atheist guys. He said, if I could convince everyone that there isn't a creator, if I could wipe out all religion, and there was only one person left, everyone on the planet was an atheist, didn't believe in God. There was one person left who believed in God. He said, and I could convince that person. He said, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
He said, I would not want to completely get rid of religion and belief in God.
One of the most powerful things I've ever heard an atheist say.
And he said, and I don't quite know why.
Yeah, that's the interesting part.
For me, that's the punch right there. He says, I don't know why.
Yeah. I think it's because as much as he doesn't want to admit it deep down, he can't wrestle with the fact of there not being a God. He can't completely 100% accept the fact that there isn't a creator.
And and he said that Richard Dawkins looked at him with incredulity. Meaning like, what do you mean, man? Like, why would you not want to get rid of all of that?
Yeah. What a prideful thing to say that, like, why wouldn't you want to do it? But also what a humble thing to say that he wouldn't.
And to admit, he said, I don't know.
Yeah. Like,
so what that tells me is that, and sadly, Christopher Hitchens passed away.
Yeah.
In 2011 at a pretty young age. He was like only in his 60s, I think. He had, I believe, a cancer.
Yeah.
But I think that the reason he says he doesn't know why he wouldn't want to wipe it all out. And I think that because, like you said, there is a wrestling deep down in his soul.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wouldn't. If he was so confident in his beliefs that there is no God, why would he not want to get rid of that if he was so? But
exactly. Yeah.
What the only thing that points to is a tinge of doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, I would want to get rid of all atheism and have everyone love Jesus for sure.
And that's again,
wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you told me that if I could convince every single person on the planet to believe in God and believe in Jesus as their Lord and Savior, I would do it without hesitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously, God gives us choice. That's why God doesn't just make everyone believe in Him, because He gives us choice because He loves us. If there's choice, if there's love, there has to be choice. It's a whole other discussion. But I would do it if I could. If I could share Jesus with every single person on the planet and have them come to belief in that, I would.
Yeah.
But he says he wouldn't want to get rid of that belief completely, and he doesn't know why.
Yeah.
It's because there's a tinge of doubt. There's wrestling within him. And I believe that, man, if he had lived for another 10, 15, 20 years, maybe he would have even converted eventually, such as like Antoni Flew did, like we talked about earlier.
Definitely.
And that goes into just a whole discussion on why this is so important now. I know that we're only in our 20s, and a lot of people listening are 18, 19, 20, 21 or whatever. Why this is so important is because truly, like, time is not on our side. When people say like, oh, time's on our side, it's like, it's actually not. We have a small existence. We are here and we're gone, and the stuff that we're talking about it's because we want people to believe in God and eventually accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior, because at some point we do run out of time. Maybe Christopher Hitchens could have had more time, and maybe he would have eventually converted or believed in a God, and maybe then eventually Christianity, as he was actually hanging out with a Christian pastor in that video. And that breaks my heart.
Yeah, it hurts.
And that's why we're talking about this, is because we believe it's that important, that it matters for our eternity. And that we want everyone to know who Jesus is and come to faith and believe in Him, because we believe that it changes our eternity forever. And just, again, talking about the purpose of why we're doing this podcast. It's because of that. It's because of people like Christopher Hitchens, who maybe if he had more time, maybe he would have converted. Who knows? Now, I know it's a lot of big statements. Let's kind of, as we not necessarily begin to wrap up, obviously this will probably be a part 2. Like, we'll have to split this into 2.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so, because this would be a lot to listen to in one take, although I love long podcasts personally, but I know some people like to split it up. So we'll definitely have this in 2 parts. But as we begin to wind down, let's spend some time talking about the one thing that he said that stumps him, which is fine tuning.
Yeah.
What does he mean when he says fine tuning? And, we have about like 15 things, actually like 20 something different things that we could talk about within fine tuning.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about all of them.
No.
If you want to know all of them, come talk to me and I'll give you the list.
We'll go over like some important ones, maybe just 4 or 5 important ones.
Yeah.
But what is fine tuning, and what are some examples of fine tuning that he would be probably stumped by?
Yeah. So fine tuning is the idea that there are so many different conditions and like mathematical constants and physical constants that are in such an absolutely perfect position that like one like Christopher Hitchens says, 1 hair of a degree in either direction and the universe wouldn't be able to be formed. Life couldn't be able to be, like, life couldn't exist, everything. There's so much that goes into it. And like Trevor said, we have a list of 22 things here. And if any one of them were off, then the universe as we know it would not be able to function. And all of them are on an like a razor's edge is an understatement, an immense understatement of the complexity of these things. And so some popular examples of this is like gravity. So if gravity were to be any weaker, the planets and stars would not be able to form. Like they just wouldn't have the strength to stick together, because physically speaking, gravity is not a very strong force. Like it seems strong because like, you know, the Earth orbits the sun and everything, but like on like a subatomic level, it's really not that strong. But if it's any stronger, then the stars burn up too fast and explode and destroy any planets that might be forming nearby. Yeah, and then the another one that we've kind of talked about is the expansion rate of the universe. And it is, like I said, it is very accurately measured, but it is insanely precise. And again, if it were a little bit more, stars, galaxies, solar systems wouldn't be able to form properly because they'd be moving away too fast and couldn't stick together. If it was too less, it's very likely that the gravity would be too strong and the universe would actually collapse in on itself and destroy itself. And we actually have a number of like the ratio of like how fine-tuned this is. And it's the ratio is 1 to 10 to the 120th power. And
that's like,
that's a 1 with 120 zeros behind it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unmeasurable.
Like,
so
yeah.
a Google, a very famous number is 10 to the 100th power. So this is 10 to the 120th power. So this is bigger than a Google.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And another thing that's just ridiculous like that is the initial conditions present at the beginning of the universe. So again, back to the beginning of the universe. But for everything in that tiny little speck to be absolutely perfect right when creation happens, the ratio for that, like the odds of that happening are 1 to 10 to the 10th power to the 230th power. So it's just absolutely insane how fine-tuned these things are.
Yeah.
What's some other things? So like,
I don't know if it's actually on here, but like, how about just like the air that we breathe?
Yeah. No, it's very, very specifically fine-tuned to.
Like you can. It's pretty easy to look up like the contents of the air that we breathe. Mm-hmm. But basically, the air that we breathe is just like incredibly fine-tuned.
Yeah.
And if there were even a tinge less or more of certain properties in our air, like we would die.
Yeah.
Like it would not be fit for life.
Yeah.
And that's where you get into the fact that like earlier, like the universe is fine-tuned, but also just the Earth specifically.
The Earth specifically is fine-tuned.
Nowhere else
for sure.
that we know of is really habitable for life.
Yeah, there's a few more down here on the list that we'll discuss, like the Earth specifically.
Yeah, like that. But that's just one. Like the air that we breathe is could it be? It could not be off really. At all, yeah. And we would die.
Like very, very slight, it could change, but like
and for certain of the properties, but for some of them, if there was any more or less,
it did just
very quickly.
yeah.
So that's just a small one. But like we can talk about. How about like this one's kind of interesting, like the velocity of light, like with the stars being.
So the velocity of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. And for us Americans that don't use the metric system, that's 670,616,629 miles per hour. For reference, the speed of sound is only 762 miles per hour.
Wow.
And so absolutely insane numbers that we've also been able to highly accurately measure. But if this speed were any faster, stars would be too bright, they would be too powerful, and it would rip, like specifically in Earth, if the sun was brighter, it would, like Earth would not be able to sustain life because it would be blasted away with too much light. And if the speed of light were smaller, the stars would not be bright enough and therefore still, again, just not give enough life, giving properties to the Earth.
Yeah.
Kind of also on the idea of light, the ratio of the mass of protons to electrons is so perfect that any slight differentiation, like any difference at all, the building blocks for life, including DNA, could not be formed. Like just any slight deviation, and the DNA can't happen, which means life can't happen.
Yeah.
Again, kind of digging more deeper into the Earth, we have good plate tectonics and geological interior that like make it to where the Earth stays kind of active, but it's not too active that it rips itself apart.
Yeah.
The moon, the fact that our moon is as big as it is really basically impossible. And what it does is it also stabilizes the rotation of the Earth, which allows us to have seasons, which means that we don't burn up and die or we don't freeze.
Yeah.
Depending on where we are on the Earth, we're allowed to have seasons that give us changes in weather and temperature and everything. Right. For
well,
sure.
Then also like talking about like the placement of the Earth in our galaxy, like how there is a very, very little room for error.
Very little room for error. So
how, basically, I think essentially because of like gravity is kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Like Earth is basically in the perfect spot.
Yeah.
It's able to stay in the perfect spot for as long as it has.
Definitely. So they're like the Goldilocks zone that they mentioned in the video. So what that is we are actually in a few different Goldilocks zones. So the most common one that we're in is the stellar Goldilocks zone. And so if we were 5% closer to the Earth or to the sun, Earth turns into Venus, 900 degrees Fahrenheit, acid rain, crushing pressure.
We all die.
If we were 20% further from the Earth or from the sun, the Earth turns into Mars, freezing, desolate, like no life. Yeah. Where we all die. Yeah. And so, which 5% and 20% kind of sound big, but in terms of a cosmic scale, the Earth is 93 million miles from the sun. Yeah. That's not far at all.
Well,
that's
and
very
really like
tiny.
20%, because here's the thing with that is like, 20%, but if the Earth was closer to Mars, life would just get harder and harder. Like we would start to have extremely cold temperatures. So like we could survive, but it would be miserable.
It would be miserable. Population would drop.
Everywhere would be like Antarctica eventually. Like I guess something like that. Maybe without the same weather, but as temperature wise, like, and then of course there's less room for error as far as like we really can't be any closer to the sun.
We really can't.
Or we would just
burn up
melt.
and die.
And so, like it's just they'll sound like bigger percentages, but if we inch any closer, like 1% closer to Venus, we're gonna get way hotter.
Like we will survive, but it'll
be like
it'll suck. Yeah, it'll be terrible.
And more obviously in some places depending on where you're at, and then of course if we edge, even just a few percent closer to Mars, it gets extremely. I mean, there's where we're at. Honestly, is in some ways like perfect.
Yeah.
And then so
also,
is there any other ones that you want to mention?
On the also with like where we are in the solar system, having massive planets like Jupiter and Saturn exactly where they are too. They actually protect us from comets and asteroids. Yeah. So their immense gravity pulls comets away from us. And it has been observed that you can actually watch the gravitational pull a comet out of our path. Yeah. And it protects us.
And obviously, if those things were to be able to get to us, we would be in trouble.
Oh, yeah. We would
probably already all be dead.
Yeah, definitely.
Some of the comets and asteroids that are headed our way that end up getting pulled away are massive, like moon sized.
Yeah, like there's a picture of the comet that we recently landed a spacecraft on. It's the size of LA, not downtown LA, but like the entire like metropolis of LA.
And then if that impacted Earth,
we'd die.
Yeah, and it wouldn't impact slowly.
Global extinction. Yeah, it's moving at like 12,000 miles an hour.
Yes.
So think
can
about.
Can you imagine that impact? I mean, literally, like you said, it could be it.
Yeah. Think about all of Mount Everest slamming into the Earth at 12,000 miles per hour.
Like that is like just it almost like it's like hard to swallow. Like that would be like if that happened. Like
and perfectly, we have planets that protect us.
Yeah,
that most other solar systems don't have.
And again, there's arguments that in hundreds of years or thousands of years, eventually, stuff could start to fade as far as the perfect placement of the earth. But that could be within God's control, and like how we believe eventually he's going to come back.
Yeah,
and could be how he does it. I don't know, but that's like still so far off.
It's so far off.
Like extremely far. It's just that when we can mention we've gone over like 6 or 7 things, and there's like over 20 on this list that we have, and more even than that to talk about. But basically, all these things, science would have to say are just pure luck and coincidence that these things are perfectly fine-tuned in place. And that, to me, that's a very weak argument. Like very weak.
Again, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Yeah, exactly.
I do not.
And these are the things that stumped guys like Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
And he could admit that. Some guys are too prideful to admit that. That might be in his circle, but it only makes sense. And again, we could talk about many more things when it comes to fine tuning, that something was in control of this.
Yeah. I don't know how else you could come to any reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
Because just like I said, the 10 to the 120th power, 10 to the 230th power, like just those two alone are absolutely insane. But to have those two along with
many
20
others,
or 20 other observations that we have, there's probably more out there that are so incredibly fine-tuned to roughly the same degree. Like, I can't imagine what the actual chance of all of these happening at the same time would be.
Yeah.
Some ridiculous number.
Yeah, it's just, again, these are things that, like you said, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And even someone like Christopher Hitchens had a tinge of doubt.
Yeah. You need faith the size of the universe to be an atheist, but faith the size of a mustard seed to be a Christian. Which sounds easier to you.
Yeah. And so we'll kind of start to wrap up a little bit, and kind of closing thoughts and remarks. If you've made it all the way through and listened to both parts of this, we appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
And we just think, man, if we're going to do this, let's do it well.
Yeah.
Let's hit on a lot of things. And we'll do more stuff like this in the future. We will do other apologetics podcasts, but on things not science related necessarily. But let's revisit the question, kind of what we started with. Are science and God at war? Are they at odds? And I think overwhelmingly the answer is no.
Yeah, we very much proved that the answer is no. We've used science to prove God, to disprove scientific arguments.
Yeah, science is
many scientists are theists.
We should Christians should view science as a aid or a companion.
Yeah, very helpful tool
in trying to understand and grasp
the complexity of God. Yeah,
yeah, and we're never going to fully figure it out.
No, not at
obviously. But science and God are not at war. They're not at odds. Christians can even love science and be passionate about it, and we should be. Those of us that are smart enough to handle it. So not me, but I think science is incredible, as we've kind of discovered today. And so how should Christians view science? Well, we should view it as like, this is a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's
we shouldn't be scared of
helpful.
it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't shut it out. We shouldn't discount it. And then of course we've also kind of tackled the question, like, can you be smart and logical and intelligent while also being a Christian?
Yes.
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Overwhelmingly, yes, yeah.
With all of the different guys that we have talked about that were theists, that believed in God, many of them even Christian, I believe that the answer to that is yes. And so, I think just my closing remarks would just be, I hope that this is helpful. I feel like, if you listen all the way through to this, there's a lot that you can really our faith is built on Jesus.
Yeah.
But you can build a lot of reason and a lot of logic for your faith as well by using science. Kind
of tightening down the hatches,
Yeah, and I know that it's been helpful for me over the last several years. It's become more important to me. And I know that it was really important for Hut and his faith journey as well. And
very.
But yeah, any remarks from you as we close? Like anything
you wanted to say? Just don't run from science. Go towards it. Use it. Find it. Put it in your tool bag. Get comfortable with it. Have a defense ready, as Paul calls us to. Just be prepared, because there's a lot of people that science is really the only thing keeping them from Christianity.
Yeah.
They're lost, they're broken, they want help, but they think that science and God can't be together, and that's just not true.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, thank you for listening. And of course, we, again, will be having another episode of the podcast coming out soon, and be on the lookout for more things on apologetics in the future, probably with myself and Hut and other people as well. So yeah, hope you guys are having a great week whenever you're listening to this, and we'll see you next time.